Good morning, everybody. This is Scott Stengel and Nate Moore drinking coffee behind me
Always.
from the Melco Applications team. Today we're going to basically digitize a logo and explain the steps and logic and all this great stuff, moving from the start to the finish. This really isn't going to be a digitize along because it would take us a long time to do that. So the general plan is going to be, also if you have noticed, you can download the artwork for this file. It's a PNG file, as well as the OFM of the finished design that I did.
And I apologize, that did change. The link that was up there was just the artwork, and as of this morning, you can get the artwork and Scott's file.
Right.
So
we added it to the folder.
He's not lying, and you did not experience something weird. It was, I had it one way and then changed it this morning, so.
So the plan is that you would watch us go through this and explain the digitizing steps and the order and all this kind of stuff. And then later, we always put these up recorded so that you can view it and hit pause, switch windows to your design shop, do what we say, you know, how much we've accomplished, and then hit go back to it and play some more. And you can rewind, you can do all sorts of great stuff to move at your own pace. But it would take forever if we waited for everybody to digitize while we were presenting. It's going to be even too long for me to digitize the whole entire logo. We'd be here probably about an hour with the explanations and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to do parts, like I'll do an entire leaf, and then we will show you how the other leaf is done, which is basically a carbon copy of it. Got something or no?
Yeah, if you're feeling super gutsy, you can go ahead and try to digitize on a separate monitor while Scott's talking. But after going through this, we figured out we're probably, if you're trying to digitize and listen and watch and with one hand do this, you might miss something.
You're gonna miss it, yeah. So that's the plan. So another thing. With the new versions of Design Shop, the latest version that came out, we've started populating the defaults. In the past, Melco's position was to just leave them blank, basically. Don't turn anything on like underlays and that kind of stuff. But it helps people today that are getting started if when they can get letters up on the screen, let's say it's already got all the properties and all that stuff to it. I started 34 years ago, and with Melco Digitrack, their first product, as I've explained in past webinars, there was no underlay, there was no lock stitches, there was no automatic conversion. Even alphabet text, once you ran it, didn't stay in alphabet, it turned into elements. So all this stuff, basically what I'm saying is, I have a hard time using underlay, automatic underlay. I underlay a lot. I'm a recovering underlay addict. No. So I like to use underlay on larger areas. But when it comes to something that's the size, half the size of a dime, I'm old fashioned and I just put down some walk stitches as the underlay and it just works. So this is very interesting because both Nate and I digitized the same logo separately, of course, and we compared the results this morning, and wow, do you see a difference in the style? There's more than one way to get it done and to get it done right, but it's amazing the difference in the interpretation of the art and how it turns into stitches. So we're going to show you some of that. Nate, he's a fan of the more populated underlay, and his comes out looking great also.
Don't get me wrong, I will turn it off occasionally, but I use it, it's just faster, and I use it quite frequently.
I just got used to my main logo when I was digitizing. I had a business for 19 years, was left chest, small stuff, and you know, I mean, to have a fill that's half the size of a dime, like I say, it's just a couple of stitches of run stitches. So hopefully you can compare the two, decide which one you want to do. I would encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and try digitizing more walk stitches, though, as you progress in your knowledge, because you can add a lot of cool effects that I've shown you with the wildlife and all that kind of stuff. And there's just times when it looks better to just do it manually. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Sorry. Okay, so let's start this logo. So Morning Glory Bakery. We're going to say that this order is 3.5 inches wide, and it's going to be for aprons. We're going to digitize it in our usual pattern we've been hammering on you, which is center out, bottom up, so it's good for hats. But this is what this order is for, in a fake world. It's going to be for aprons. So first of all, we would open up the PNG file, and so everybody should know that. It's open. Go find the artwork, plaster it up on the screen. So the first thing you want to do is view it at the actual size. So what is the actual size? If I highlight the artwork, I see that it's 3.8 inches wide, and we wanted 3.5. So it's important that you scale your art first when you start to the actual desired size. So I go 3.5 inches, they're locked, so it's going to scale proportionally. Now I've got my actual size. So you can draw full size, or you can draw actual size. I have hotkey. Do you know which one this is?
Actual size is the one
right there. There we go. Boom, like that. I have 0 for blow it up to the whole screen and 1 for draw actual size. So hotkeys, we've talked about them before. They're really, really time saver.
I do this, and then I got onto a computer that wasn't mine, and I'm like, oh, T's not for trim anymore. It's not my hotkeys. Yeah. While I've interrupted you, we were talking about sew order and things that you're going to consider. When this artwork was created, it was created to be a bit of a pain. You've got some overlapping things that are not necessarily conducive to sewing from the middle out. But one of the questions, and it's a really good question, and I think it takes some clarification, is how do you make a fill sew from the center out? And you don't. We're not necessarily talking about each element sewing from the center out. We're talking about sewing away from things we've sewn before and sewing away from the center of the garment or the design area. So if the fill is on one side, you're going to sew all of one direction away from that, or away from things you've sewn before. So it's not the individual elements that we're worried about so much.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good.
But that was, I thought, a very clever question.
I did several in the past. Anyway, Elysian Fields is a logo that we use in class on hats. 15,000 stitches, has a big rectangular fill behind basically everything. And for that one, yeah, you sew the fill from the bottom to the top in one pass. There is no center out. But previous to that, if you go back and look, you could see that the underlay, I digitized half of it from the center to one side, then I walk back and sew center to the other side. So
you can do it with underlay.
Yeah, you're starting. Back to underlay, like I'm a fan of kind of underlaying a bigger area at a time. So my choice in the leaves is to do a light density fill over each leaf completely and each flower before I start individual parts. Okay, so first we open the file, we set it to actual size, and then we're looking at it and going, wow, you know, some of this is really pretty thin, as well as how big is bakery. Now, like I talked before, if you look at this thing gigantic in email that the customer has sent you, you're like, yeah, we can do this at left chest. Look at it, it's beautiful, no problem. Well, looking at it huge, you don't realize that bakery is under 2/10 of an inch tall at the actual size. Thanks, Nate. No, it's great to have all these challenges because this is what you run into in the real world. Okay, so if I view actual size, well, I'll zoom in and I'll show you. If I measure from, we'll say how tall is the K, you see it's 0.18. 0.20 is 3/16 of an inch. That's where we've kind of considered the threshold for 40 weight thread and readable letters.
And I am going to jump in. I care less about the height of the letter. I care more about the width of the line, or more accurately, the length of the stitch line going across. So would you measure that?
Yes, I will. And these are nice fat block letters, believe it or not. So if I measure across, it is 14 points.
Which is better than I thought it was going to be.
It is.
Oh, you scaled it bigger than I thought you were.
Well, yeah.
That's why.
I went 3.5 to take it a little bit easy on you guys. We originally kind of said 3.25. So the width of the satin stitches in the word bakery are okay, but still you're going to deal with the holes in the R's and the B and the A.
Yep.
And that's going to give you trouble. The other problem that I see on this one is you really don't want to stitch the gold behind such small letters, or you're going to add distortion with the different layers. So I'm going to cut this at the outside edges of the letter, and I'm going to leave it void inside. You don't really notice it. Okay, so we've adjusted to the right size. We've discussed the tight areas, which are going to be the outlines around the leaf. If I zoom in here and I want to do this, let's say in a satin stitch, if I measure, this is 5 or 6 points. We're talking not even the width of the needle, so there's no way I could easily do a satin stitch unless I make it much wider. Probably these are not going to happen in satin stitches because they're just so thin, so we're going to do those in a walk stitch. That's no problem. What else do we have going on here? If you look, a common thing would be, hey, let's just do all one color at a time. It's very easy to keep straight in my mind. All light green, now all medium green, now all lavender, gold. But it's unrealistic because if I look at it, this stem is underneath the letters where this stem is over the top, and same thing going here on the other side. So I can't easily get through this doing one color at a time, and I'm done. Good. You got anything to say?
Thoughts went through my head.
This
is a big difference. I mean, a lot of times you'll hear about efficiency and things like that, and this is a big difference in having a lovely multi-needle machine that can change colors and go back later for you, or having a single needle where you're changing the colors all by yourself. You're swapping out the thread. And boy, that doesn't sound like fun. But this is a big difference that you'll see in some of us who are digitizing for these and running at higher speeds that have multiple needles, versus a single needle that's running at slower speeds, and it takes longer for them to change out the thread and all of that. One thing that I really like, doing a color and then doing an outline and then doing a color and then doing an outline, if it pulls a little, you're going to be less likely to notice.
Yep, finish as you go.
Yes. So it not only does it help sometimes with layering, like in this case, but it can help with your registration, design registration.
Okay, so how would we take care of these areas? Well, obviously we're going to use multiple color changes, and we're going to come back at the end for the green that's over the top of the letters in Morning Glory. So first, bakery. There's 2 ways to deal with that. One, I could just sub alphabet text. Something like micro block would work at about 2/10 of an inch. And the other alternative would be to digitize this smaller and then scale up at the end, which is the way I chose to do it, and Nate went with micro blocks. So we're going to show you both ways, which is just incredible. As far as the outlines around the leaves, I chose to overswing and fatten them up so I could do a satin stitch, and Nate went with double walk.
I will say that you forgot to mention to me that you had changed and scaled it up a little bit from what I was doing. So I had a little less room.
It's amazing how much thicker, though, even at 3.5 inches, you have to make this to work. It's
huge.
Basically, we got to have 13 points. 15 would be really good. 13 is acceptable. And these are 5. So it's going to have to go, think about it, almost 3 times fatter than it is on the artwork to make it work in a satin stitch. And we're going to cut the density to get it through pretty quick. Okay. So I will tell you, if you do have a version like Pro Plus or something like that, there is a way to fatten things up if they're in vector. So I'm just going to show you the Melco shield real fast to explain how this is done. What's that?
Nothing, never mind.
We have designs, graphics, Melco shield. All right, so we'll turn off all colors, and I'll just show you the one border here. Turn off the background. Okay, if this is in vector right here, but let's say that this was too thin to digitize, rather than excuse me, over swinging the mouse, which we're going to do for the leaves, I can just go into the properties. And I can actually, you can do it from the main screen here. If I pick color, I'll show you a weird color so that you can see the difference. As I increase the thickness, you see now, imagine if this was all red, which is what you would do. You can see how I've added thickness, kept the same shape without having to overswing the artwork.
You can do the same thing in Illustrator or Corel Draw if you have those that don't have Pro Plus. You can do it in that and then export as a PNG.
And bring it in here and fix it. So there are other ways. I use this frequently when I have EPS files. It just keeps me right on the edge instead of having to overswing and then correct later because you don't get the right width. So I'll close that. Just so you know that's available, though. It's a really good feature.
If it's organic, like the leaves or the flowers, you can do it freehand just as you're digitizing with a little less consequences as opposed to those very strict edges of like lettering. Then you might want to try to fatten that up some other way.
Okay, so we've discussed our our tight areas, our problem areas. You really want to go over it with the customer and go, hey, I'm sorry, but your bakery letters are too small. I need to boost them up 10 or 15 or 20%. Is that okay with you? Or the other alternative, people know digitizers take liberties with artwork because we can't stitch everything we can print. And so they just kind of assume you're in control, make it look great. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is think about how we're going to digitize it. You'd never want to just jump in and go, hey, I think I'll start with gold and get to it. You got to think of the layers, the foregrounds, the backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. I highly recommend write them down on a sheet of paper. I'm going to show you how I planned this out. Other than just light green goes first because I'm doing the lower leaves, we also want to put the part of the design on our scratch list. So it's going to say that it's the lower leaf fills, and then it's medium green, and it's the lower leaf outlines. It just helps you because you're going to focus on your digitizing, and it's one less thing to distract you when you just can mechanically go through like a list of steps. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you should totally do this because I didn't, and it took me way longer than it should have because I had somebody come in and interrupt me, and then I was digitizing in a different order, and I had way more editing than I would have had I actually planned it out the way that Scott is talking.
Yeah, there's nothing like silence and all that. Although I will say, for 4 years, I digitized 10 feet from a 12 head running production. I was good at tuning things out, but yeah, it's going to be good if you can focus and do it start to finish always without tons of interruptions, but we know how life works. Okay, so we're going to plan out our colors, and if we think about it, I like to start bottom up, so we're going to go, like I had explained, medium or light green for the fills. Then we're going to do green for the border. Finish as you go. We're going to finish them so that if they drift around as we're stitching the rest of the logo, doesn't matter. They're already completed and look good. All right, so after that, then I choose to move up and do these flowers. So I'm going to start with the centers. I forget what this is called. I was trying to put that in there, but I'm like, it's not the flower center.
I don't know.
It's been too long since I had botany class, yeah, whatever. Okay, and so I'm going to do light lavender, medium lavender, and dark lavender. Then I will do the Morning Glory letters.
Probably not in that order.
Yes, exactly. And then at the end, I'm going to come back for what's over the top, which is going to be this stem right here and this over here. So when I show you what I have written down, I just happened to type it up so you guys could see it better. We're going to start with the light green for the lower leaf fills, lower leaf outlines, light lavender. It's going to be the center. I didn't know what else to call it. Then the upper flower fills, the upper flower outlines, then the morning glory letters, followed by bakery letters, and then we're going to finish up, like I said, with the stems. This is really important because, you know, if you get halfway through and you do get interrupted, you come back, it helps you more. Okay, here's right where I was, and start. So this is very important, and it is so worth taking a couple of minutes and planning this out instead of just jumping in and getting, as I say, stitched into a corner. It's like painted into a corner because I didn't plan it, and oh, I'll just trim there. Some of that's the problem with today's designs is they're so cheap, people have to do them so fast, they don't think them out, and you get an extra dozen trims in your design. And, you know, that costs you production time. Okay, so I think we've got it all planned out. The next thing I like to do is, just personally, I like to draw vectors so that to tell me which direction the fill's going. So you can do this with walk stitches if you don't have a version that has vector lines. Just make them in hot pink or something weird so that you know to delete them, because you don't want to sew them when you're all done. This just kind of is one less thing for me to think about. So rather than do this in one fill, I'm going to go at an angle, and this will be another angle. I have been I've been fond of using yellow as my color for the vector lines. It just is really, really easy to see. So we'll do the default there. And this is going to be the same thing. This will be sort of a herringbone thing. These guys will be sideways. I'm going to break this up into two fills. So one will be here, one will be here, and they will be at different angles. I always encourage you to change the direction of your fills so that the light reflects off of it and really gives you a cool, you know, sort of 3D thing. So after you get done digitizing this and sew it out, take it out and by the window or in the sun or something and move it around, and you'll see that the fills, the different angles really play off the light, and it's nice. So this will be something like this direction here. This one will be more like here so that it moves around, and so on and so on. I would do the rest of it. Okay, so I do my vector lines. Also, I will use them in lettering too, because I want to compensate that push, right? So I can easily, for here, I will put a straight line. I'll hold Alt so I constrain my line and hit Enter. Then I'll highlight it. Now I'll put in my curve, hold Control as I move it up. This is going to give me my baseline. So I know that the E and the B come down to it, but I'm going to cut off a stitch for the A, K, R, and Y, both top and bottom. Here, then I would duplicate, and I would move this guy up. I'm holding Alt so it stays in the place. Same deal with that. I'll grid out letters that are with the artwork is very poor, because you need to have them the same consistent width. That's what your eye is going to see, and if one's less width than the other, you're going to notice it. It's going to make letters look bad. Okay, so after I draw all my vector lines in, or my wild colored walk stitches to show my reference, now I'm ready to set my defaults and start digitizing. Anything you want to add?
No, I was typing too much to pay that much attention.
Okay. All right.
So one question. The vector lines are just so that we know which direction we're going to be digitizing? Yeah, that's a lot of them. Mm-hmm. The ones on the lettering are a little bit different. They're to know where my edges are going to line up to, and where I'm going to stop for push and extend for pull. So those are slightly different. But the main ones, yeah, and except for the lettering ones, I can accomplish very similar things by printing this out and taking a pencil or a marker and going over my drawing so I have it beside me. And this was something that I used to do frequently.
Yes, and like I've been hammering over the last webinars, if you print out your logo at actual size and put it right next to you, it's always going to keep grounding you, because you get zoomed way in on something and you're thinking, look at the edge of this leaf, right? I can do zigzag edge walk. No, So if you're always looking back at that, and I used to put actual size printouts on the boards when we used to digitize that way, and it really, really helps.
I remember a customer phone call. I apologize if I embarrass anybody because I do not remember who it was. But the call was, whenever I'm digitizing a curve, it comes out as a straight line. He was zoomed in 5,000%. Oh. And you can't curve a stitch.
I see.
So the sense of scale gets completely lost when you're digitizing on screen. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, but it's very common. The other thing is people don't zoom in far enough, right? Embroidery has a very high resolution, and you can get quite a benefit by zooming in to digitize. If you're too far out, it gets sketchy sometimes.
But you lose some accuracy too.
And we have auto scroll, and so I'll frequently get zoomed into a fill and have it pan around or bump. Auto scroll, I guess is the word for it.
I get a little car sick with auto scroll.
Yeah.
So I will hold shift and scroll on my mouse, so I'll zoom out and zoom back in where I want it to go. So I'm in control of that. So if that lack of control bothers you, you have other ways to do it. Or I'll use just scrolling to go up and down and control and scroll to go left and right. So all of those are available to you.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so now we're going to start. So set defaults. Some people do them, some don't. Oh, it depends on the design for me. If it's big, that has many, many elements in it that are like jacket back that are the same, I'm a fan of doing it there. But I'm going to use, for example, 4-4 density for the outside here, 5-0 for this the lines down the center of the flower. I'm going to use 3-8 for here, and 4-4-2 for here. So what default do you set? But some people
auto.
Auto, yeah. Okay, so yeah, auto is designed to take care of some of that. If it's thin, it would give you less density. If it's fatter, it would give you more. All right, so how do we set defaults? We go to View, and then we go to Properties. Yep, and that brings up what we have. Usually all elements tie in. This is going to be probably populated already. 7 and 3 is what we're finding works the best for the tie-in sequence. 1 and 6 is fine, and auto trim is checked. Then I can hit apply, and I can go to, let's just say satin stitch. I go to top stitching. This is going to be 4.4. Everything else ought to be okay. Hit apply. Maybe, I don't know, if you want to do fill. This is good like I want it, so I would set this. And then what you do is you go here and go save defaults for the current document only, not permanent. And now,
unless you really like those settings,
yes,
then you can save them permanently.
Yeah. Styles, another way to do it. I'm not going to cover that part here. Okay, so now that I've set my defaults, and I've got my list planned out, light green or medium green, whatever, the fill is going to be the first. So I'm going to move over to it, zoom in, and I grab the walk stitch, 20, 25 points. Tighter the walk stitches for thinner areas. So I'm going to shorten it to about 18 or so when I do the walk stitch under here. But for the leaf fills, 25 would be good. I always like to start off with a walk stitch. And I start in the middle, so here's where I'm going to tie in. It's going to give the machine some stitches till I go over to the start point when I start stitching. So here's a left click, and let's just go here. Hit enter, and now I grab the fill, and I'm going to digitize an entire light density trapunto fill behind the entire leaf. And I tend on small shapes to just use straights. I mean, if you got something like that, yeah, you could do a long area curve, but it is also not that much to just do something like this. I know I look old-fashioned, but thousands of them.
In my head, I'm screaming, use as few points as possible. It's easier to edit, and yeah.
You don't need to edit it though, right? All right, enter. There are no holes. I'm going to say the start point is here, the end point is here. I'm pushing from the bottom up. And then what angle? Oh, usually something perpendicular to the way the top stitching is going to work. However, what I like for this is I will right click, set properties. I'll go 20 density. And I'm going to shorten the stitch length to 3 millimeters or so. And I like trapunto because it keeps everything squared on the edges and all that kind of stuff. So you can see how this turned out here. Actually, I got the center walk turned on.
I wonder what that was.
Yeah, it's the underlay. Okay, so this is the underlay fill that I have. Next, I'm going to switch to walk stitch. I've got 25 points. I don't know if you noticed, but...
Sorry, how do you know you're pushing from the bottom up? Would you select your element again?
Oh, when I define the start and stop.
Yeah, it's when you define the start and stop. So the little green circle is where he's starting. The little red X is where he's ending that design. And then the little white propellery guy is the last stitch of the previous element. So you know where that last one ended. He's starting really close to there, but not right on top of it to give it like a little bit of a stitch. Otherwise, you're right on top of itself, and that could cause a thread break. And then you are moving in the direction from that green towards that red.
Exactly. So it's not the order you digitize the nodes to make the fill. It's after you're done digitizing the outline. It is, are there any holes? And then it goes right to give you the start and the stop and the direction. Okay, so yeah, that's very important. I can't hammer on you guys enough about this. So many designs I see that come through here, people walk right to the start of the fill. So they have an element that stops and the next one starts right on top of it. In my opinion, that's not good. The machine is actually set to filter out zero motion stitches when you load it. But if you have something that's 1 or 2 points off, it's not going to filter that. It's just a great place to have a thread break. So I try and alleviate that. So you can see that my exit point is here for the trapunto fill. Now I'm going to do my own edge walk around it. So back to the walk stitch tool. I'm not going to start right here. I'm going to start off to the side.
Why are you walking around the edge instead of through the middle?
Through the middle?
Are you going to sew over it?
Yeah.
So.
What do you mean?
Doesn't matter. I would have crossed across the middle because I'm going to sew right over it in a minute anyway.
I guess I'm not following exactly.
Do what you were going to do because I may be completely crazy.
All right. I just choose to do walk stitch.
Now, as he's doing this, he's generating stitches. Watch as he's doing it that the little L in the lower left-hand corner, when he's clicking, it's always above 20-ish points. If you see that falling below 10, then you're starting to sink stitches that are less than 10. He's being very careful not to do that. Oh, you're creating more underlay. I'm an idiot. I know what you're doing. Never mind.
Yeah, no, edge walk underlay. Okay. So now I've got my base. Boy, this thing feels good. You know, you get a good feeling when you're watching a design sew and it has just the right amount of underlay. It's just, it's a good feeling, right? I don't know. I like it. Simple pleasures, right? Okay, so now I'm going to grab the fill. This could be done in a fill stitch type or in a satin stitch type. A satin stitch tends to give you a smoother. It's sort of like a fill if greater than. It'll turn into a fill when the stitches get wider, or the length gets wider than 6 millimeters. Your choice. You could try 1 leaf in fill, 1 leaf in satin. Look at the sew out, decide which ones you like best. I'm going to go with the fill, and so I will. I'm going to stitch one this direction, right, and another this direction, so the light plays off it when I'm done. So I grab the fill tool, and now I just I have to remember that I'm stitching not quite up and down, but pretty close. So I'm going to need to stretch the nodes on the sides of it, because that's where I'm going to get my shrinkage. And I'm not going to push all the way to the end, because sometimes the fill will push out over the sides. So since this is a side, I'm going all the way to the outer edge. And I'm probably going to end up pulling them more after I get my border on like that. So here is some curves, some straights, whatever you find works good. I'm stopping short of the end, and then I'm going to come back the other side. Now I need to overlap this center a lot, or I'm going to get a gap in there. All right, enter. There's no holes. Enter again. Here's where we tell it start point. Here's end point. I'm going to come back a little bit and give me the angle. Remember, I already plastered that in. I like to hold Alt because you know, regimented angles just seem to work good. They always have. All right, now I go back to the walk stitch. I could change the start point of my next element to end up, but old-fashioned. Okay, so I'll go back here. I'll hit, I actually have my space bar set up for the last two elements, so you can see that by hitting, I switch from walk stitch to fill.
If you're looking for that in the accelerator editor, that's previous insert tool.
Yes, awesome feature. Oh, because you can really get a rhythm without having to keep coming off the artwork to click on input tools. All right, so then we're gonna stitch this, carrying it all the way to the outside. Bring this guy in. Here we go, all the way to the outside. And here's our point. Now when I come back, I'm on the other side of this spline down the center.
Nice.
But just have to have an overlap. Enter, no holes. I'm going to start here. Here's the propeller from my last element, right? And then I'm going to end, oh, I could end here. I'll come back a little bit. And the angle then is going to be something like that. I'm digitizing in blue, which is the default color. I'm always about using a contrasting color. I just am a fan of blue. It's easy on my eyes. Sometimes you like hot pink, Nate? Very electric pink helps you see contrasting.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of what it is what do you digitize? What colors do you digitize?
We get kicked off?
You're all right. Keep going for a minute.
Okay.
Is the manual? Is that the manual? So what page? Weird. Yeah, we totally got kicked off, but I think we're back.
Are we back on? Sorry,
yeah, we're back.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Like last week with the snowstorm, right?
Brenda asked me that again. Is what in the manual? And I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. And the page numbers changed, but I'll tell you what to search for.
How to set up?
I don't know.
Oh.
She asked it, but I wasn't paying attention. I was paying attention to you, not the delayed video, so I don't know what you said when she asked it.
There is help around the 130s page because it changes when we update the manual. But it's going to explain kind of where do you start, what do you be concerned on, scaling your art. Nate did a great job on sort of what we've gone over here, so you can always look at that.
Search process. Oh, the two tabs. Oh, accelerator. I will look that up.
Okay, so here you can see I've got my two fills done, and I'll go out of 3D now. Well, so here's your choices like I was saying. If I highlight the two fills and I can switch them to satin, it's a 3D look. I mean, it's a puffier, good look. I decided to go with the satin, I think, on the final, but we'll have a look at that when we're done. Okay, so we digitized the fill there, and we would digitize this other fill here. I'm going to save some time.
The answer is no. Previous insert tool is not listed in the manual, so I'm going to have to fix that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, accelerator editor is, but previous insert tool is not a tool that is shown, so it's not in the manual.
I see.
So I am sorry. I will try to get that fixed.
Excuse me. Okay, so we finished the light green here. I would trim and move over and do the light green here. Same way. I'll show you on the next one. So let's say I'm finished with the first color. After I'm done with the color is when I'm going to colorize it, right? So I'm going to select that color here in blue, and I just use sort of generic palette colors for now because we'll do the final colors later, and pick a light green. Now, when I deselect, you see that I've changed my color, so that's colorized roughly, but I still have the blue insert tool. So I'll just continue to use blue through every color as I'm digitizing, and then I'll recolor the colors after I've done each block, and this is how I get my contrasting colors.
That works really well.
Interesting, yeah. Okay, then it comes to the outline. So I choose to hide the fill so it's not going to get in my way. Now if I look at this, like we said, these are just terribly small. So we're going to use walk stitch on something like this. This is marginally thin. I fattened mine up, did a satin, Nate did a walk stitch. You can see the difference in the two of them. Okay, so we'll grab walk. I'm going to shorten this down to between 18 and 20 points because I want some pretty nice tight stitches. Let's go 18. And I choose to start in an area that's going to get covered. So if I have any problems with the tie-in or whatever, it's going to be covered later. So I'll start back here. Left click. Now I'm going to come right down the center. And I will choose to do all this in one walk stitch. So here I'm going to walk past the end. Come back. I line up the needle penetrations because I find it has the cleanest look. Alright, so here is just left clicks, and it's not going to really matter if these are exactly perfect from the original.
That's funny, you lined them all up, and I purposefully offset mine because it was an organic
element. I mean, there's in Europe and Japan, I found this, a lot of the designs I look through, they tend to offset them. And we do give you that feature to offset, right? Okay, so here
with a retrace, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so you see, here's all one element, not 10 elements. It's pretty simple. Just give it a shot. And like I say, you can see where your nodes are on the way out to line up on the way back. While I'm here, I could hit enter. Whew, that's enough, right? And I'm still in walk stitch because the next thing I'm going to do is run a underlay walk stitch around the whole leaf outline. I choose to do this myself because it is one continuous line around the whole shape. If you turn on center run underlay, you're going to get a run and a run back because really most times with center run you wish to have 2 layers for your lettering and stuff like that. So this just gets it done.
And typically for most elements you don't end exactly where you start, and because this is a loop essentially, you can get away with this.
Alright, so I walked around and I also am at the bottom of the stem. Now I'm going to grab column 1 or column 2. I'll just use column 1, and I have to overswing a lot because this is very, very thin. And then I'll hit enter. And now I'm going to digitize around here, around the border of the leaf. So I will switch to column 2. It just seems easier than column 1 if you have to overswing. So I'm going to do this in a series of right clicks to help it even out the density.
Sometimes if you have to do this, you can use, like right now Scott is using the full screen crosshair.
Yes.
I tend to use the little arrow cursor because when I was showing people, sometimes it was easier for them to see.
Yes.
And so that comes from just classroomness. But you could sometimes find, okay, if I'm like about the width of the cursor, you can use kind of what you got as spacers, which is kind of handy.
Yes, exactly. I forgot to turn off my crosshair cursor.
Don't stress.
I have used it. I've used it just like forever. But to be honest, I do turn it off when I'm digitizing like script alphabets for Melco and stuff because it doesn't help you.
There's nothing straight.
Oh, but there is nothing like being able to see everything is lined up either horizontally or as I'm moving across, I'm in the same vertical, the same Y height and all that kind of stuff. I would have a hard time getting by without that crosshair. Okay, so column 2, we digitized, and we put in our stitch directions, and we hit enter. And then I would start another one here. So my tool's already selected, And this is the last one that I'll do, and then we'll fast forward.
So as you're doing this,
please.
As Scott's doing this, I want you to pay attention to what he did with this corner. He stopped at one angle and is starting another. He's not trying to have the element kind of transition those all the way around. He's helping it fan. It's not even a normal kind of miter, but because of the shape that it is and what it is, being that organic leaf, and at the size that it is,
yes,
where it's teeny, teeny, tiny, you have to kind of help those stitches along a little bit, and I think that's a brilliant way to handle that corner.
Yeah, so back to the underlay, if you had center run on and you saw it did this one, it would walk out, walk back, so you get two. Then here, if top stitch it, then it would walk out, walk back, so you're getting 2 layers of underlay stitching. Under a 12-point column is I don't know, a little bit much for me. Okay, so anyway, yeah, I wouldn't want to miter the corners. That's really good. So now if I turn on my first color and I highlight it, you can see that I stretch that all the way outside. And then sometimes you got to go back and you got to fix areas. You know, stretch them past. These are a little bit short. Now I would just drag select this whole group and move them up, right?
So there, I thought you were looking at the other end. I'm like, I bet it would push to fill, but you were looking at where it was going to pull.
Yeah, yep. So there's all, you know, touch up edits and stuff like that always as you go. Okay, so that shows you the second color in it, which is the medium green. You want somewhere around 14 points, I think, for the width of the border, depending on different fabrics.
So Kimberly is calling us out and asking, when I say that I use auto, do I just check the auto box for that? We'll look at my file here before too much longer, and I'll show you some of those properties and what I do.
It would be a good time now if
okay.
you want to take over.
Give me a second to swap over.
Okay, so yeah.
Okay.
We could do this all day.
Good.
I mean, I could.
But you can swap me over.
Okay, let me go to Nate here. Boom. Here's Nate's screen.
It's already done. Pretend like it's not. But yeah, if I go to view and properties, you'll notice that my underlay box is checked enabled. My top stitching, if I go to my satins, my auto density is checked, and all that's doing is saying if you're this width, be this density. If you're this width, be this density, and it kind of fans throughout all the time. So I will use this. Like many things in life, I work backwards from Scott. I will use auto on most of the time, and then I will go turn it off for the things that I don't want it on, and he will digitize it with it off, and then the things that it can work for, he'll turn it on.
Edit it in at the end.
And I think a lot of that goes to what we're digitizing. Is it applicable to what you're doing? You do super detailed, tiny little things, and that doesn't always work well for that. You tend to live in that 10 to 20% range where that really doesn't work. I tend to live in the 80% range where it does.
Yeah, it was like, hold your breath, you know. Are these going to work? Sometimes you just have no area. If letters are stuck inside a banner and you can't scale the logo up.
Yeah, you don't have options.
Yeah.
And lately I have been in the more normal range.
And when I started, the guys that taught me actually read paper tape. There was no editing. And so they would pull the tape through their fingers until they found the jump stitch set of holes, and then they would punch holes to change the design. It was crazy. So a long way back.
So yeah, we now have the option to give it a shot, and if it doesn't work, change it. That wasn't the case. So Scott is coming from a very different standpoint than I do.
One thing I forgot to mention, before you start, how we planned out the colors and all that kind of stuff in order, if you have challenge areas, I might call them, let's say I had 10 weird letter O's in a logo, and I'm not sure how that's going to digitize. Rather than digitize them all, if you can practice, do one, sew it out, right? That is just such a time saver, because you don't want to go down the squirrel hole or whatever and pick a wrong decision and do 20 elements like that and have to go basically edit the heck out of them or redigitize them. So if there's areas you're not sure about, it's really worth your time to just sample them, sew them, and change and sew again. when you got it right, it's already digitized, right?
Right.
You just
You
use it
copy
in
and
the
paste
logo.
whatever,
So,
yeah.
okay.
Go ahead and swap
more?
back to you, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so enough digitizing about this so far. I actually have my file right here, and you can see the vector lines that I drew in like I showed. I've just turned off the colors. So I will turn off the vectors, and I will also, let me see, I'll just go down to color 1. We were starting to see, you can see here, this has auto split on, so I use that for both of the leaves. And then we go to the outline because, like Nate mentioned, you want to finish as you go. So right away, finish these up, and then you won't have to worry about them drifting off. Notice that I've done the outlines, and I've also done the leaves that are the stem that's going to be covered by the letters, but I didn't do the one where the stem is going to cover the letters later. Okay, so this is really pretty simple. It's walk stitches and columns, just like I explained. Then I'll move on to the next color, which is the flower center. That's really a no-brainer. That's just two. You could use column 1, column 2, complex fill, all sorts of stuff for that. All right, then it comes to the flower fills. So this is how I did it. I put, let's start at the beginning. Oops, I started on this side. Start with the walk stitch, then do the underlay fill, and then I do a walk stitch back. Then I'm stitching this front leading edge in a satin so it looks like it's coming out at the foreground, like towards me. Then when I do the fills, this is the satin fill that I was telling you about, which just looks different than the regular fill. And I use the curve to get the stitches to bend because the light reflects really good off them. If you don't have this feature, it's not a big deal. The important point is that you digitize two separate fills with different angles. So this one's running this way, and this one is running this way. And you can see, like we said, the light reflect off of it. All right, so then stretch this out a little bit. Okay, so then basically the other side is done the same as far as the flower fill. Now we switch right away to the border because I'm going to hammer that down and be done with it. As this moves, all right, you can see that I started a hidden area. I walk, staying on this side, and then the column starts here, so they're not exactly lined up. I use column 2s for this because if you see, look at how much farther the stitches are compared to the artwork, both inside and outside. The other alternative, people say, well, how about I just digitize it real thin and then just nail it with pull offset? I don't know. Yeah, there's like, yeah.
You have a lot less control with it that way. Here you have, yeah.
You still want to digitize the thinner areas and the thicker areas, sort of, make a distinction between the two of them. But my experience says I'm better to fatten it up some and use some pull offset instead of just nail it there. The other thing that I noticed on this one, which is a great heads up when I was doing this yesterday, is if I go in here, I ended up putting 2 pull comp, which I'll show you on the end. But if you run into different areas where it looks like it stops generating the stitches, like right here, if I shut off the art, you see? There's one, so the filter is set that if it's less than 5 points, it's going to generate every other stitch till it gets to the above 5 points. This is like a red flag area because I know if it's under 5 points and the needle is 7.5, remember, that's going to give me trouble. So yeah. I'm going to fatten that up. Column or pull offset will also do that. But as you go through and you see that happening, that is the red flag.
But to get that to work is going to take far more pull offset than to
Exactly.
drag the point and make it thick enough to start,
Exactly.
and then make it thick enough to look good.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so let me turn back on the art so you can see. Okay, so then we finished with the dark, the burgundy, which is the border around the leaves. And then I'm going to attack the letters themselves. So here's over under, right? You can see here bakery's over, the stems are under, these are over. So how do we do something like this? Let's see, I'll go show color. All right, here we are. I'm gonna start in the center and do LOR, and then I'm gonna walk up, because look, this is all connected. So I'll walk up to the O. The other thing that is my favorite in digitizing is Control D for duplicating. I just absolutely love duplicating. It used to be like free money, right? If you do half of a shield and then you can duplicate it, you know, but you've spent a lot of time on the first half anyway. It can be a time saver, of course, but also it helps give you consistency, which is what makes your logos look better. If I digitize an R 3 times, I'm going to get different possible, you know, results here and there. If I duplicate it, they all look uniform and the same. Okay, so this is a no-brainer. You guys can kind of do this. This is just a bunch of column 2s. So we will do the first section, and then I choose to walk up to start the second. So this is a column 2 that starts here and sews around. Oh, there's like, do I turn this tight corner or do I just move up and start it over?
I started over.
It depends. Yeah, this shows you 3D. See here, there's no way you could bend all this. So I chose to stitch this one actually up to here and then start another one, and they're overlapped where they meet. I chose to bend the corners where Nate started over. That's just what's interesting about different styles. And if I digitize this tomorrow, I might start over too.
Well, it's like, so here's the other thing. You actually sewed yours out. I haven't had the chance to sew mine out yet. So
yeah, and
after I sew it out, I may be like, blah, and have to change it.
I did make changes, yeah, after the sew out. Okay, so not a ton is connected, so you kind of do have to trim, but I do the OR, and then, like I was saying, I will walk up. I think I can find that walk stitch. There it is. So I finished actually the Y, and then I walked back so I could start stitching this way. We talk about center out. Yeah, it's a rule. It's sort of a suggestion or whatever. Every stitch, a guideline. Every stitch every time does not do that. And so I chose to, instead of sew these backwards, the O and the R, because here is the center line of my design, I just, for a half inch or whatever, just ORNIN, you know, G this way. So copy and paste is really beneficial. Also, for doing the dot, I finished the G here. I trim, come up. I do some walk stitches here, just in an outline pattern, and then stitch it, and then move off. You got to be careful sometimes when you trim dots on eyes. This is pretty big, so it's not going to be too much of an issue, but on little lettering on left chest, sometimes you stitch the tie-ins, the underlay, the top stitching, the tie-offs, all in this little area. You can pull the dot through the back of the shirt, and you don't want holes in the shirt. Okay, so then the last thing, I guess, is the word bakery. And so there's two different ways to do this. I chose to digitize the shapes to make the letters myself, and then I scaled them up. Now when I scaled them up, I grabbed each letter and scaled them 15% a piece, rather than grabbing the whole works and scaling it. I just,
well, that's going to make
a different result.
Well, no, it's also going to make it appear, this is confusing, but but the letters are all still in the same place essentially in the final sew out, so it's going to appear more accurate than if you took bakery and scaled it up.
Then it's going to become wider, a
Yes.
lot wider. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and then I chose to move it down. And then one more thing, like I talked about, is I ended up cutting the gold letters. I don't want them behind the letters. Now I actually stitched them and they came out looking terrible. So I ended up then going back and editing and cutting them out. So no stitches under here, although I do take and walk from here to here, right? Why have a trim? Keep your trims to a minimum. And Nate, you used for bakery, how did you do it?
I did keyboard lettering. If you want, I can swap over.
Oh, all right. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did keyboard lettering. I'm not sure how this is going to sew out. I had it overlapping. Again, I haven't sewn it. My guess is I will sew it out and not like it. And I will have to cut that out and travel the way that Scott did. I just did micro block with an envelope. And so I just added a curve point and drug that up to match the artwork. I got to move it back down. Yep, typed it out. I don't even think I changed the spacing all that much.
And notice he did use micro block because it's made just for small letters.
That was a really good point.
You don't want to take something that has a ½ inch minimum and smash it to 1.18.
It didn't match the lettering exactly. And this is where I may or may not care. If the final sew out looks good and it's very, very close, that is far better than being accurate to the artwork and looking not so great. But again, yes. I've yet to sew this out, so
I can't tell you. Small times letters were very popular when I was digitizing, and you still are. But they have a little bit different look. Oh, this is a little bit more slanted, or it's a bigger opening for the R, whatever. I would try and digitize those, but by the time you end up fattening them up for embroidery and making them work, they all tend to look the same.
Yeah.
So I digitized my own, mini micro times is the alphabet that's in Design Shop, but I use that all the time. People want crispness. They're not going to notice exactly, that R is a little bit wider than mine or something like that.
True.
In
They're
general.
not going to notice that.
Clear is better.
Scott navigated this loop. And I started over.
Yes.
So, show you that. One thing, if this does start to close up, do not be afraid to grab these points and move them over to open up that Y. Even though, again, it's not exactly accurate to the artwork, having that negative space could be very important. And again, I won't know that really until I sew this out. So just keep that in mind. And same thing with, is there an E in here? There's an O. Is there an E? No. G. I was going to say, there's something else that I was looking at. The G might do it.
Yeah. So, see, you started over. I rounded mine.
I started over, I think I started over almost on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The G's the only one I didn't. So, yeah, every edge starts over. And when you're planning out these strokes, and I can replay this. When you're planning out these strokes, I tend to think of it as I don't know why that just happened, but how would I do this if I was taking a marker and writing out these letters?
Yes.
So I didn't go from the bottom up. I reserve the right to change that after a sew out. I told you guys more than once I will sew out and then edit.
Oh, always, yes.
So this is a first pass at it, but you'll see the difference in the lines in the leaves are walk stitches. The flower on the right has no special effects. The flower on the left has more effects added to them, things that we could do in Pro and Pro Plus. Mm-hmm. The one on the right is just straight up Design Shop because of a comment I received yesterday, and I was like, I should do both. So I did both. So we'll sew this out and take a look at it then too.
It's more important that you break up to multiple fills, in my opinion, than if you
agreed, and I think we have almost the same number.
Mm-hmm. interesting though, the difference. Oh yeah, one thing I did want to show you. I've talked about this.
Gotta take back to you.
Oh yeah, I do, don't I?
Uh-huh.
There we go. Sorry. This area here, where you have this 90-degree intersection, comes up all the time in embroidery. And sometimes, well, so the way that it happens is this stitches first, this stitches up to here and stitch starting here, so that when I come around, I basically am pulling a gap, right? And so the fabric will show through. So several ways to take care of this. I could just take and angle the stitches so now they're not running parallel or perpendicular. They're sort of 45-ish or 30 or something like that. That will help because it jumps the different lines of stitching. Another way would be to put a column sometimes in here, run in this direction. We do that on puff all the time. The way that I do this is old-fashioned, but it's pretty cool. You ought to check it out sometime. So I will stitch, this column starts here, stitches around to here, and it stops right here. The next thing I do is grab the manual stitch tool, and I will take, manual stitch only penetrates where you click. So I'm not worried that this will have walk stitches in the middle, which will bring my eye right to it. And so just go across and back up, and you're going to seal that area between them so that then when I do the second column.
Show that in 3D, please.
Alrighty. So yeah, here it is, and here is the walk stitch.
So you can't see it. It's a great trick. Manual stitch is a great tool for that. You can also use it to hide a jump over a satin, which he did right in the middle. Great tool for that, as long as you're planning on not scaling the design. If you scale this up and that satin becomes a fill, then that manual stitch will become noticeable.
Oh, yeah.
So just be careful with that.
Definitely. Okay, so then the last thing, of course, we do is the stems that go over the top. All right, so we have everything digitized. After you're done, of course, very critical that you want to use the icon center design before you're done. And that will put everything centered around the origin. I'm going to zoom around a little bit, 2D, 3D, switching back and forth, make sure my fills are always pushed to the outside limits, or if I need more or whatever. Look at the sew out and do what needs to be done. There's rules you'll see that keep showing up from time to time, but if you just fix what needs to be fixed after looking at the sew out, you're basically learning these rules.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I will do is I will just put in the official colors for production that I have.
And I'll do that based on the threads that I have, or do I need to order threads for this, and am I using an actual thread chart? And if I am, I'm probably taking it out into better light than what's in my office.
Yes.
But then what are you basing it on? Are you basing it on the printout? No, because RGB values to CMYK values, that's going to change. So just be careful and get your colors approved from your customer too. But that's a completely separate issue.
Yep, but very nice to store in the file so you know which green to pull when the reorder comes in. So I've got a picture of the sew out. This is the file that you guys have, and so not bad, huh? I mean, you can see how everything has come through that we talked about.
I have a feeling that's going to look better than my first sew.
Well, this is my third sew. Yeah, and believe it or not, the issues, the small lettering at the bottom, just
small lettering is soft. And I was not nice when I created this file. I created a file to give you challenges with small lettering and outlines that aren't going to be nice and layering that is going to be difficult. So this file is not a super beginnery file. This is a file to discuss problematic areas. So you can see how both of us, well, eventually you'll see how both of us tackled these challenges. Right now you've got Scott's answers.
Yeah. I like beginnery. That's a cool word.
I make up words all the time.
We do. We come up with great underlap, all this kind of good stuff. One last thing. So we talk about center out, bottom up, all this stuff. Well, we really didn't do that. We did, the outside leaves from the outside, and then we did the middle. just because the over-under, if this is on an apron or something similar, it's not going to be an issue. But if you're going to stitch this on hats, which we're at 2 inches by 4 inches, whatever, 3/8, 3/5, whatever, so it will fit on a hat.
That's doable.
You might want to resequence it. And so I have my gold color here for all the letters. You know, I could start and resequence by just pushing part of the letters back to the beginning, right? I'm going to need to, of course, leave off the G and whatever. But just by taking this and sliding it to the first color, so it would be something like LORY and then ORNIN, right, at the beginning. And then stitch the flowers and the leaves and all that stuff, and then come back for gold a second time to do the G and the M and the G here. So that is easy to do. It's very easy to do since it's digitized from scratch in Design Shop. You can't do this in Expanded, but yeah.
Meredith says she would love a super beginnery class. So super beginnery, the videos that we have on each individual tool are going to be there, and then there is a video where, do you do it? Do I do it? I did it, I think. We go through a file that you already have, Earth Day, which is super basic bills, but it does have how do I go back and I outline, and that's all available on our YouTube page. So you can check that out under, I think, Digitizing Basics or some playlist very similar to that.
It was in the manual, too, where you listed the colors in order, the 1, 2, 3.
There is not currently a video in the manual, but yes.
No, I mean, but it's listed in the manual.
Agreed.
Right? Yeah, so you can get great help there. Sorry we went an hour and 15, but, you know, you got to have fun, right? So hopefully you've learned some stuff about digitizing from start to scratch. I encourage you to take the artwork, load it on your Design Shop, scale it to the right size at 3.5, and then you can watch back through this and hit pause, or you can run my file in Design Shop, then start with the artwork in a separate window, and then just go up top and switch windows to switch between the two. You know, see how it's done? Do it. See how it's done? Do it. Stuff like that, and help you get through it. Know this, and know that you're going to take a different path, and some stuff is going to be different, and that's what's kind of cool about embroidery is everybody's a little bit unique in their designs. More than one way to win too. Okay, well, we'll look forward to seeing you next week, and everybody have a good day.
Thank you so much.